Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Words of Life podcast with Adam and Kevin. Today is the week 2 of our study this year in 2026, and we are tackling again the book of Judges. And today we are getting into our first first stories of actual judges. Last week we spent a lot of time setting up the book and doing a lot of history. But before we get into that, I want to say hello to Kevin.
Hey, Adam, how you doing?
Good. Anything new and entertaining or prayerful?
New entertaining or prayerful? No, I spent my whole day off today, working on different things. Tore out all my sprinkler valves in the backyard and reinstalled them, and then went down to the church building to try and we're trying to get some better mics of the singing, right? So I've learned a lot about cardioid microphones and XLR combo jacks and all that kind of stuff. And so I was down there messing around with that for a couple hours today. I think it's going to work out good. Just got to get it all dialed in and hung now from the rafters and the ceiling. So
in the theater world, we just called them like puck mics, that they would actually sit on the stage. It'd be on the stage mic, so they'd pick up anything that was happening up above them, right? So I'd wondered oftentimes if those in reverse on the ceiling, if those would also be really good for singing, so.
They might.
They're pretty low key, as long as your ceiling is not, if it's flat.
Right. And ours is pitched, right? We've got a triple steeple looking roof kind of thing.
A-frame or vaulted ceiling, it makes it a little more challenging. Unless you've got beams going across, then you can probably use those. But
So I learned more about microphones in the last couple of years, especially, and in this last 6 months than I ever figured I'd know. So
well, you tend to accumulate knowledge over time,
Yeah, and with the advent of YouTube, right? Like it's pretty easy to become an expert on a lot of things as long as you're not relying too much on, like I don't know if I'd want to try and learn heart surgery or anything like this, but there's plenty of good information about microphones and setting up and even churches and all, you know what I mean? Like it's a pretty common thing that people post out there.
So we moved into a new building this last year, just because we were just busting at the seams in our old one, and it was previously occupied by a church who did a lot more electronic music.
Yes.
Then so they had, when we first got there and viewed it, they had like sound panels all along the walls. Yeah. All of the windows were covered. They had like, the big full on stage with a drum set in the corner, and it was pretty wild. But they had done a lot to reduce the sound.
Yeah, sure.
Spray foam, the open rafter ceilings, and things like that. And so just removing a lot of the open up the windows and doing all those things, that helped a lot. But we're to the point where we're actually looking at sheet rocking the ceiling back,
sure, over
so that we can actually hear again, because our singing is excellent, but we can't.
It just like deadens. Yeah, right. Sure. Yeah.
Just like, you hear like three rows around you, maybe,
right.
That sort of thing. So
yeah, we had a similar situation. We moved into the space we're in now for about 6 years or so, and the previous group had, and the space is not huge, right? I mean, it's, think old country church style, right? Like about that should give you a rough estimate about the size, right?
Yeah.
But when we got there, they had left a bunch of, again, there's pickups everywhere for guitars and amps and all this stuff, and they actually left like a large baby grand piano as well there. But when we went back in this room that they had, there's a mixer board that, I mean, you see like on TV, like when they're recording in the studios. I mean, this mixer board's as big as my desk. And I was like, what all were you doing in here? Your space isn't that big to need this many things. Yeah. I'm like, I'm getting a new one that's this big, right? To pick up.
It's pretty well. So
what's happening here?
We're like, how do we turn the lights on?
Yeah,
because all we actually need is an on-off switch.
Yeah.
But they have this. We still have to use it because that's where all of the lights in the auditorium are hooked up to this big giant machine that was used to like all of the 15 or 20 presets for lighting and for it's
changing the sets for this.
Like we're minimalizing, we're just reducing.
Sure.
So too fun. All right, diving into our study, everybody. If you want to follow along with us, we're going to start reading together in Judges chapter 2, picking it up in verse 16. And I'll just go ahead and read all the way through chapter 3, verse 6, and we can talk about a few things, and then we'll let Kevin pick up with the first judge named Othniel. All right, so I'm reading from the ESV version, and it says, "Then the Lord raised up judges who saved them out of the hand of those who plundered them, yet they did not listen to their judges, for they whored after other gods and bowed down to them. They soon turned aside from the way in which their fathers had walked, who had obeyed the commandments of the Lord, and they did not do so. Whenever the Lord raised up judges for them, the Lord was with the judge, and he saved them from the hand of their enemies all the days of the judge. For the Lord was moved to pity by their groaning because of those who afflicted and oppressed them. But whenever the judge died, they turned back and were more corrupt than their fathers, going after other gods, serving them and bowing down to them. They did not drop any of their practices or their stubborn ways. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he said, Because this people have transgressed my covenant that I commanded their fathers, and have not obeyed my voice, I will no longer drive out before them any of the nations that Joshua left when he died, in order to test Israel by them, whether they will take care to walk in the way of the Lord as their fathers did or not. So the Lord left those nations, not driving them out quickly, and he did not give them into the hand of Joshua. Now, these are the nations that the Lord left to test Israel by them, that is, all in Israel who had not experienced all the wars in Canaan. It was only in order that the generations of the people of Israel might know war, to teach war to those who had not known it before. These are the nations: the 5 lords of the Philistines, all the Canaanites, and the Sidonians, and the Hivites, who lived on Mount Lebanon, from Mount Baal-Hermon as far as Lebo-Hamath. They were for the testing of Israel, to know whether Israel would obey the commandments of the Lord, which he commanded their fathers by the hand of Moses. So the people of Israel lived among the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, and the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And their daughters they took to themselves for wives, and their own daughters they gave to their sons, and they served other gods." So that is really kind of a synopsis for the next 400 years.
Yep.
And Kevin and I were talking offline, and he was kind of doing the math quickly. You know, what you think is about 400 years, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at a lot of the other, if you kind of ignore the book of Judges, right, you kind of look at the other time markers you get about, when they left the land and when they come in and these kinds of things. What you might call the period of the Judges, right, is about 400 years. And that depends, again, you'll see 400, 450, 360. It kind of depends. Are you counting the Exodus as part of that timeline, right? Is Moses one of the judges, right? Because he's not a king. Are you counting Samuel, who is, the last judge, so he's not in the book of Judges, right? So yeah, you're looking at 400 years, depending on, how what you're trying to count, right? As your end markers. And yeah, when you kind of go through the book, and we'll see today, right? The land had peace for 80 years, the land had peace for 40 years, or things like this. So it seems like there must be some overlap, like you talked about last time, right? Like maybe whatever's happening up here in this place in the north may be overlapping with what's happening in the south, and it's a different judge that's delivering them. And it's not just one people, it's not the Canaanites oppressing or the Philistine lords, right? Oppressing the whole entire land. They're oppressing some land, right? And Mesopotamia is coming in. They're not oppressing, they don't own the whole land, right? And so, yeah, you kind of look at that, and 400 years the story is going to go on here.
Yeah. So I thought we mentioned last week, and I'll go ahead and use this time to share this map that I was able to drum up. So this kind of gives you an understanding of the fact that none of these judges were actually over the entire nation. They tended to be slightly geographically bound.
Yeah,
regional judges. And so our first judge we're going to talk about in a second is Othniel. You see him way down there in the south, the southern part of this region. Sorry, I'll go over here. And so Othniel is down here in the south, in the land of Judah. And then Ehud, who's the next judge in our list today, is right here. And then we have at the very end of chapter 3, poor guy gets only like one verse,
Sure.
Shamgar, right? And we don't really know exactly where
Anything
Shamgar is
about him, right?
because
Yeah.
there's not enough information given, but we'll read that in a second. But I found it pretty interesting that to know kind of like where they were at and to put them in perspective, you know. So and I've got some questions about Othniel and the struggles that he was up against, and maybe you've got some insight you can share on that when we get there. But um, yeah, it's just kind of sad. And one of the things I think about in terms of what's in this for us today, do we see it where our children or some of the children of those Christians that we grew up with just don't believe and don't follow and aren't faithful, you know? Yeah, I can't imagine that this was a universal 100% of all of the people of this land weren't
Sure.
faithful, right? We know that it can't be true. Otherwise, who would God send?
Who would they call out for, right? Who was calling out, right?
Right?
Yeah.
But you know, it's one of those things like the majority of the people, it seems like, were going away. They were doing, you know, and Jesus himself, when he arrived on the scene in his Sermon on the Mount, he said, you know, narrow is the way to salvation, but few will find it. And the road to destruction is wide and it's easy to find, and everybody's following that, you know? So it seems like for those who persevere and stick to it, to their faith, they're on the narrow road, and it's a smaller group of people, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we just read there in that section, again, chapter 2 is basically a summary of the whole book, right? And then chapter 3 is listing which of these nations were left behind that they didn't drive out. And some of that's happening in the time of Joshua, right? Joshua didn't drive them all out either, right? And so you'll see there the last, it's like, okay, here's these places, okay, great, whatever. But then verse 6, right? This idea, and their daughters they took to them for wives, and their own daughters they gave to their sons, and they served other gods, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the thing. They didn't drive them all out. And then you did the fallout of that, right? The fallout of that then is that they then begin to intermingle with them. I mean, in theory, you could have not driven them all out and still not intermingled, right? But no, that wasn't what happened, and it wasn't whatever was going to happen. That's why God said to drive them out in the first place. And that then leads them into this other path, right? And so, we talk about who's going to be the biggest influence on your life that's a person. It's going to be your spouse, right? This is the person you're with, if you do it right, every day for 40, 50, 60 years, right? They're going to impact your life. They're going to impact how you do things. And, you think, well, maybe I can, look, Solomon took all these foreign wives, and what happened to him, right? Like, and he's this wise man, right? David, you'll see, get into trouble with these wives and things. And so it's like, this is why God is telling them to do that. And so that's another thing I think you kind of think about when you think about, what's in it for us, or what can we take to heart.
Yeah.
This idea here of, hey, be careful. And you and I are, past that, but our children now, right, are out picking spouses. And so, be careful who it is that you choose to marry. Because this is what led them into that problem, right? It's clear that that's there for a reason, and not just, oh, I'm just letting you know, right? No, that's part of the problem.
And I'll confess that it's partly culture because of my father, more so than my mom and my dad Gary. But my father's family was always been very. It's been very important to them to remember their past, remember their heritage, their family tree, and to honor, to keep records and things like that. So one of my aunts is really, really like, she's the historian for the family now, and she's kept all the records. I don't know if there's going to be anybody that's going to carry that mantle on.
Yeah, sure, right.
Right? To keep up with that level of importance that she and my father's generation and beyond have helped. But when I because of that influence in my life, it's hard for me not to think about future generations of my lineage, my own direct descendants, And so it's important to me that and I struggle with like how much direct influence do I need to play in my children's relationships? You know
Sure,
what I
right.
mean?
And don't marry that one.
Right? Like, I mean, you know, it's like, what do we like? Where's the line that I shouldn't be crossing? You know, and so because it is important to me, I want to. Well, I really want to like them.
Yeah, sure.
Right, that's important. But aside from that, luckily, I'm batting 1,000 so far.
So far, so good. Right,
we're doing all right. You know, but I've only got one son. You've got one son, and not that our daughters are any less important. But the namesake, it's all through the Bible. How can't we think like that? You know. But ultimately, as long as my kids are raising up Christians, it doesn't really matter what name. They're God's name.
That's right. That's right.
They're named for God and for Christ. So anyway, I digress. But yeah, so these generations of people, they were going astray, and we want to do everything we can as fathers and parents and grandparents and as young people coming up, you got to pay attention. And yeah, going with the flow is fun, and being part of the world can be, you know, enjoyable. But our ultimate reward is what we're supposed to be keeping our eye on, so that we don't fall into these traps. So it's always a good reminder. All right, why don't you take it away at verse 7 with Othniel, and let's talk about Othniel for a bit.
So let's jump in here. 7 through 11 in chapter 3. It says, "And the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. They forgot the Lord their God and served the Baals and Ashtoreth. And therefore the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he sold them into the hand of Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia. And the people of Israel served Cushan-Rishathaim 8 years. When the people of Israel cried out to the Lord raised up a deliverer for the people of Israel and saved them, Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. The Spirit of the Lord was upon him, and he judged Israel. He went out to war, and the Lord gave Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia, into his hand, and he prevailed over Cushan-Rishathaim, so the land had rest for 40 years. Then Othniel, the son of Kenaz, died."
Okay. No great battles recorded. No other details other than, here's the time and the place, and here's the guy that God sent, right? Pretty short and sweet.
Yeah, and you kind of look at that, you think of that map you had there, and you're like, well, why did they figure he was down in that area, right? Well, again, it's lineage, right? Okay, so this guy is the nephew, if you will, right, of Caleb. Okay, well, we know what tribe he's from, so we know what area he's in, so right, so this is where these maps are coming up with these things, right? It's not because it says he came from this city necessarily, some will, right? Or he was in this area, some will. But okay, well, we know what tribe he's from. Mm-hmm. All right, so then that's must be where he's at, right? So that's how they're coming up with that stuff.
Well, I think also that so I had questions because in my brain, when Caleb said to Joshua, "Hey, I'm as strong now as I was when I was 20 at the age of 80 or however old he was. I want to go up to the hill country, and I want to take." And I thought it was up in the north.
Yeah, no. I think
up near like in the uninhabited parts of Naphtali or something. You know, way up in north.
Yeah, and so I think when you go and look, right, if you go back to chapter 1 of Judges, right, that's when you'll see. This idea, the men of Judah fought against Jerusalem and captured it and struck it with the sword, right? Judah went against the Canaanite who lived in Hebron. From there, verse 11, they went to the inhabitants of Debir. The name of Debir was formerly Kiriath-Sepher. And Caleb said, whoever attacks Kiriath-Sepher and captures it, I'll give Achish and Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. Oh, wait. So part of what's happening here is this Othniel story is happening in chapter 1.
Right.
It's sort of rolled back. And then, what will you give? She asked her father for a field. She dismounted the donkey. Caleb said, "What do you want?" And she said, "Give me a blessing since you give me the land of the Negev. Give me also springs of water." And Caleb gives the upper springs and lower springs. And so the Negev, right, is that area in southern Israel, southern Judah area that goes down towards Egypt, right? That sort of thing there. And so that's sort of setting the locale, if you will, of that. And then again, the same thing Judah is there. It's talked about the Negev near the Arad in verse 16. Judah went to Simeon his brother.
Mm-hmm.
They defeated, it's talk about these territory areas. They lived in Jerusalem or near Jerusalem. And so that's kind of that map then. If you want to pull that up again, you'll see that's that area that is being talked about in chapter 1 of Judges, right? And that's the same thing that we kind of see happening in so the Negev there would be the very, very bottom sort of your map almost there, heading down even towards Egypt, and Jerusalem on the left side there, though, right over on this what would be called this side of the Jordan, right?
Okay.
In the Bible, there's this side and the other side, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other side is the east side where they had come from as they came across,
right?
And so this area of Judah, right? That there, the Jerusalem is in that area, and so we see the hill country and going up to, right? It's how that is. They talk about it not geographically north and south. It's elevation wise, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and so that a lot of that stuff is happening here in the south part. But it's interesting that you see it in 1.
For some reason, I just remembered this area being what was talking about by Caleb.
Well, and that could be, but the thing that's talked about here, right, is this southern area, right? So this is his younger brother's kid who's doing this work in this action down here in the south, and taking these cities and doing this stuff. And so it is interesting that it kind of seems like, okay, so it's hard to know, right? The chronology is a little strange there, the way that Judges is written out. But did this happen in chapter 1? And then they're oppressed for 8 years, and then he raises them up again, and he does this work.
Mm-hmm.
Or my suspicion is that this thing that's happening here in chapter 1 is actually the battles, if you will, and what's happening in chapter 3, right? When he raises him up, he goes and he does this stuff, and he's all these kinds of things, and does some of this work. That this may be part of that. That there's this overlap there in how that goes. But yeah, it's interesting that he kind of gets this call out in chapter 1, then he's called out again as the first judge in chapter 3. So either way, chronologically, he's the first, and he's around doing stuff almost contemporary with Caleb, as a contemporary. I mean, at least during his lifetime. Let's say not a contemporary during his lifetime. For sure.
Well, so then we have this idea of this Kushan Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia. Now, if you're looking on the map, Mesopotamia is over here.
Yeah. Yep.
So this king from the east has somehow oppressing. Yeah. And we have lots of problems from Moab. So who knows if this Mesopotamian king is coming from, we don't have any recorded history here, and I haven't done any secular research to do it, but I know Mesopotamia is over here.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and you'll see a lot of this happening, right? These things coming from the eastern side, and they may be oppressing these other people as they go, right, along the way, which is likely. That they're coming through, or they're coming around, or they're coming up under, and either way, but they're getting over there because, again, if you think about that map, right, if you're talking about that area, it's unlikely you're bringing armies across the Jordan anyway. You're coming sort of down underneath, and
through Egypt, or
at least under, the end of the Jordan there in the Dead Sea area. And
there's a reason why this is called the Fertile Crescent.
Yes,
and why it was always hotly contended, right? People wanted it because it was fertile, right? Lots of water, lots of stuff can grow, and all that. So it was, there's a reason God made it the promised land. So we have this period of time, at least in the south there, where Othniel, kicked out the oppressor. And for 40 years, everybody was fine down there. And then he died, right?
Yep.
and then we move on to Ehud. So, do you want to read a little bit of Ehud's story, or?
Yeah, let's at least get the first couple verses to see sort of again where we're talking about. It says, "And the people of Israel," verse 12, "again it was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord strengthened Eglon, the king of Moab, against Israel, because they had done what was evil in the sight of the Lord. And he gathered to himself the Ammonites and the Amalekites, and went and defeated Israel. And they took possession of City of Palms. And the people of Israel served Eglon, the king of Moab, 18 years." And so again, if we kind of look at that map again, or think about it anyway, now you're going to see Moab, right, is that area. Okay, we got it, right in that area. And he kind of gathers some additional people, the Ammonites, and as you see Ammon up above it there to the right, and the Amalekites. And so he gets a confederation of people to go and fight against them and kind of come over into this area and oppress this area here, which again means which of these areas is being oppressed. I mean, it's likely all of this stuff. What was the tribe of Reuben's area, Gad's area, right? And then Ephraim, over here into
Dan, maybe.
Yeah, the southern end of Gideon, and that whole region in there, which Naphtali is split, and so that whole area there is probably being oppressed. Lots of tribes are being impacted, and that's why you'll see it say, they served Israel, served them, because half the tribes are in that region, right?
Well, and the city of Palms, that's Jerusalem.
Yeah, so there's this whole area that's now being involved and challenged here by Eglon, the king of Moab, again, and he's now risen to power, right? And that's what happens in this area. You'll see the Philistines do this, and the Moabites do this, the Amalekites and the Mesopotamians, right? There's this rising and falling of political power and military might in this time. And so, while previously, right, the Mesopotamians were over, now their power has waned enough, and Moab's power has risen enough that now, Mesopotamia is doing their own thing, and Moab's now oppressing Israel in this region.
Yep. I mean, Othniel killed that king off, and there's a
power vacuum and a
vacuum in power, right?
Yeah. So now this is what's happened. Now the Moabites are tough, right? And so now they're oppressing and doing this kind of thing. And you'll see that change, right? And then there'll be the Philistines and the next one. So they just one after the next after the next. Each power cycle kind of goes and goes.
All right. And then so they took possession of the city of Palms, and the people of Israel served Eglon, the king of Moab, 18 years. So quite a long time. And I like how it always says, then the people cried out.
Yeah.
Like, it probably just didn't happen overnight. It's like, they didn't declare, this is our cry out to the Lord day. It probably happened where they were just all sick and tired of it.
Like in Egypt, right? They cried out, right? And it's just continually sort of thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. So verse 15, then the people of Israel cried out to the Lord, and the Lord raised for them a deliverer, Ehud, the son of Gera the Benjaminite. So remember, Benjamin was the smallest tribe, and they kind of got wrapped up with Judah's land when the land was being all partitioned out. But Benjamin is kind of just near Jerusalem, south of Jerusalem, if I'm remembering correctly. And Jerusalem, or Benjamin, is just a small portion near the upper portion of the Dead Sea, basically. So this guy, but Benjamin being of the lowest tribe, the smallest population, they didn't even have their own land. They had to join Judah, right? And so they were never revered like some of the other larger tribes. If you were of the tribe of Benjamin, you were of the lowest of the low in terms of the hierarchy of Judaism, right? Or Jewish culture, I would say, not Judaism. All right, so he's a left-handed man. The people of Israel sent tribute by him to Eglon, the king of Moab. So Ehud was said, hey, I don't know, maybe it's because he was left-handed, like, we don't need you anyway, because you're weird. You go and take the tribute for us, right? But no, it's because God had raised him up as a deliverer. And so Ehud made for himself a sword with 2 edges, a cubit in length. So if you're not a Bible student or you don't know what a cubit is, it's typically the distance from a normal man from elbow to finger. We typically speak it about 18 inches.
Yeah.
A 1.5 foot long sword, double-edged. And I like watching Forged in Fire a lot.
Yeah.
Right. So this was a big a double-edged dagger, basically, right, that Ehud made for himself, 18 inches long. And it said that he strapped it He bound it on his right thigh under his clothes. So he's left-handed. He bound it to his right thigh, possibly to the inside thigh.
Yeah, it seems to be indicating that it's hidden, it's concealed.
It's a
right?
concealed weapon,
yeah.
right?
However, that's because it's on the right, not the left, because it's on the inside or the outside. The Bible's trying to convey that he hides this weapon on himself.
Correct.
Because, they wouldn't be able to take it into the king otherwise. He wouldn't walk in with a sword to deliver the tribute. So
100%, right? All right, so he made for himself a sword with 2 edges, a cubit in length, and he bound it on his right thigh under his clothes. And he presented the tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. Now, Eglon was a very fat man, and when Ehud had finished presenting the tribute, he sent away the people who carried the tribute, but he himself turned back at the idols near Gilgal and said, I have a secret message for you, O king. And he commanded silence, and all his attendants went out from his presence. So Ehud is basically able to get into the presence of the king, deliver the tribute. He turns around and he says, wait a minute, I forgot I have a secret message for the king.
Right. For your ears only.
So he goes back and says, hey, I've got a secret message for you. And the king says, well, silence. Everybody out, right? And thinking that nobody would come in before the king and cause any harm. Obviously, he's got no weapons. What can he do to me, right?
Yeah, right.
And all his attendants went out from his presence. Verse 20 says, and Ehud came to him as he was sitting alone in his cool roof chamber. Big fat guy cooling off in his chamber. And Ehud said, I have a message from God for you. And he arose from his seat, and Ehud reached with his left hand, took the sword from his right thigh, and thrust it into his belly. And the hilt also went in after the blade, and the fat closed over the blade, for he did not pull the sword out of his belly, and the dung came out. This is disgusting. And there lay their lord dead on the floor. So it's like a modern day assassination story.
Yeah, right.
Right? Where you go in, you're disguised as a friend, you're bringing tribute to the king, and you've gained trust and audience with the king privately. You couldn't. I guarantee you, like, authors have used this as inspiration for their own stories to make money. Right? You can't make this stuff up. Now, listen, I'm an overweight guy, but there's no way an 18-inch sword.
Right. It's covered up my fat rolls.
Fat belly.
Right.
Right. And the hilt.
Right.
and it be still in me. Right. This guy must have been gargantuan.
He's a large man. Yeah, he's a large man.
Just immense,
Yeah.
And so, yeah. What else you gotta say, Kev? This is
it's just and again, a lot of that stuff is there to sort of describe for us, what happens kind of after, right? Part of it is about his escape there, right? So he stabs him with this sword, and we know the length of it because it was told to us, and he gets rolled over, right? So he doesn't even see. You can't see it now. He doesn't leave with the sword. He leaves it in him, and then he goes, and then they're waiting around, right? Because their assumption is, as near as we can tell, either he's relieving himself because he's just cool, trying to cool off. But the implication there, because it says till they were embarrassed, is they thought he was relieving himself, right? He was using the facilities,
and
in
so
the
corner closet of the cool room.
Right.
So this palace,
it's in the water closet, right?
Water closet where the king could go in and do his business, you know.
Yeah.
And it was a cooler room, so if he was reading a book or playing a game on his phone, right? But yeah, it's just wild. So,
and that's why he's able to escape, right?
Yeah.
Because the idea there is he comes out without the sword. That's the first thing, right?
Behind him, and
he closes the doors behind him, and King's busy, right? Yeah, right. And so they wait and they wait and they wait until they're like, man, I'm like embarrassed how long we're waiting here, right? What is the king doing? So then they finally get the key and unlock it, and then when they go and they see him dead on the floor, right? By that time, right, verse 26, he escaped while they delayed, right? And so that's sort of, why are they telling us all this detail? Because that's how he got got away, right? And escaped from there. Yeah, it says 26, Ehud escaped while they delayed, and he passed beyond the idols and escaped to Sirah. And when he arrived, he sounded the trumpet in the hill country of Ephraim. Then the people of Israel went down with him from the hill country, and he was their leader. And he said to them, follow after me, for the Lord has given your enemies, the Moabites, into your hand. So they went down after him and seized the fords of the Jordan against the Moabites and did not allow anyone to pass over. And they killed at that time about 10,000 of the Moabites, all strong, able-bodied men. Not a man escaped. So Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel, and the land had rest for 80 years. And so you see what he does, right? He gets away, he heads back over. So he's probably down in Moab, right? He gets up, he escapes, he gets back into the land of Ephraim, and he basically says, hey, everybody, I've killed the king, right? Let's go. So they head across, and then they hold the fords. There's places where you could cross the Jordan, right? You could ford the river there when the right time of the year anyway. And so they hold that area, and this is where these battles are now happening. They, because again, remember, they're being oppressed, so they're being foreign occupied, let's say, right? So they don't let the people escape, and they kill everyone there on their side of the Jordan, effectively. And there's this huge battle where they kill out 10,000 people. And so then, because now they've, killed the king, they've decimated the army, then, right, the land has peace for 80 years. And so that's a good run, right? For how long they're sort of at rest, if you will. And this probably also fills into this story, right, of, all the days of the judge, right? So, how old is he when he goes and he does this? I don't know. But, at least his generation then, let's say it's another 40, 60 years he's around, and they're kind of doing things like they ought to, right? And then the next, whoever's still of his generation around, and then the next generation will rise up, kind of a thing. But there's peace there for the 80 years in the land, at least in that region there, that central, which is a lot. Again, that's the center of the country. That means most of the land, right?
Yeah, and it's pretty crazy. Like, God, sends these men to do these great deeds. And then they have the aftermath. I mean, 10,000 people die. All able-bodied men. That's what it mentions here. 10,000 able-bodied men of the Moabites were killed. That sets a nation back generations.
Yeah, that's
right?
I mean, that's a big number. Yeah, I mean, you think about our country, right? It's not 10,000 men, right? But no. You have to sort of understand the scales of armies and things in this time.
Yeah.
I mean, if you remember back to the story, this is now past this, obviously, and I'm not suggesting this is the same size. But, if you remember and you go back to the story of Abram and Lot, right? And he goes and he gets them, and he the size of his army that he takes to go and get these people back is in the hundreds, right? Yeah, right. Yeah. And with that army, he's able to defeat all these kings, right? Because again, these armies are not like we think of armies today in our modern nation sizes and things of that nature. But yeah, no, that's a significant defeat for sure. And because especially you'll see in the next one, we're talking in the hundreds again, right? And sometimes we'll see these numbers that are much smaller. So 10,000 is a large number.
Yeah.
And they're maybe not all warriors, right? But they're all able-bodied people you could conscript into your army, right? To go and to fight.
Exactly. So Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel, and the land had rest for 80 years. Then we have the epic battle of Shamgar. Right? Poor Shamgar gets one verse, but man, I wish I would have come on, I really want
I know, I need more story here.
The play-by-play here, right? Because at verse 31, the last verse of 31 of chapter 3, says, after him was Shamgar, the son of Anath, who killed 600 of the Philistines with an ox goad, and he also saved Israel.
Yeah, right. So we know this is a different sort of story, right? The Philistines, where are they at? They're not over in Moab.
Right.
And so the Philistines rise up and they're oppressing some portion of the land, probably over in the western side, based on where we know the Philistines live generally. And, he delivers them. And, it's hard to say. Is this a one-time thing, or is this he just repeatedly goes out and harasses Philistines and one at a time? And his weapon of choice.
Had a hobby.
Yeah, right. His weapon of choice is a pointy stick, effectively, right, is what he's using here. And you might ask, like, why would you use an ox goad? But the sort of the idea, the implication there is that at these different times, when you bring these oppressions upon people in the ancient world, you would restrict their ability to make weapons, right? And this happens all throughout history. I mean, in the ancient and even as you push into more modern times, I mean, you think a lot of the what we call the martial arts, right, from the East, Japan and those areas, and a lot of those weapons that you see that they use in that are modified farming implements, right? That's what these are, and that's exactly what this is, right? He's got a modified farming implement or a herding instrument that he goes and he uses to kill people with, Philistines. And so he kills a bunch of people, 600 of them with a pointy stick is basically what he does.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, was he like, Aang the airbender with just with a staff,
That's right, yeah.
Wielding it like just a staff whirling around. Who knows, right?
Well, and we'll see these other things too, like with the jawbone of a donkey, right? Like just I'm clubbing people to death, right? Is basically the implication here, right? As you read some of these stories.
Yeah.
And so he says, and so he was able to deliver them from the hands of the Philistines. How long? How long do they have peace? We don't know anything else about it, right? Which is why we don't see them on the map, right?
Yeah, but 600 bad guys were taken out by Shamgar with an ox goad.
That's right. Yep.
Because they needed killing. Apparently, they were evil guys. So.
Yeah, they needed deliverance, and they were oppressing, and so he delivered them. God raised him up, and that's what they did.
Absolutely. So,
and it's a weird story too, because it almost sounds a little bit, because when you jump into the next chapter, say, the people of Israel did again what was evil in the sight of the Lord after Ehud, right? And so, like, wait, what happened to Shamgar? And so it almost feels like this could be a sort of a contemporaneous thing, right? So Ehud is over here taking care of the Moabites, right? And after him, at the same time, meanwhile, over in this part of the land, right, the Philistines were oppressing, and Shamgar took care of them, right? Because then the next thing will be, it doesn't say after Shamgar, it's and after Ehud, right? It will be the next one that rolls in there. So you get these things sometimes, or it may be like, here's the main story. Oh, but there was also this little side quest going on over here, right? Of this guy, and he did this, and delivered them.
Yep. I mean, it wasn't nation against nation. It may have just been, this uprising of Philistines who were oppressing a couple of villages, in Ephraim or something, and Shamgar just said, you know what? I'll take
enough of that. I'll take care of it. Yeah.
I got this. Don't worry about it. Right?
Yeah.
So that's great. All right. So we're going to stop there, and we're going to pick it up next week at chapter 4 with arguably one of the most written about judge.
Yeah.
And an unusual judge, because it was a woman. Her name was Deborah.
Yeah.
And she had a general whose name was Barak, and he was awesome. So was Deborah. Together, they did lots of great things. And we're going to learn all about it next week. If you'd like to read ahead, go ahead and read chapters 4 and 5. And we'll get into Deborah and Barak next week. That's it for now. Yeah. Any last closing thoughts, Kev?
Yeah. No, I think we covered it pretty well there, right? But it is, I guess, maybe think about, which we'll see in other places, and it'll be expressed in other ways that, God can use anyone and anything to bring deliverance to his people, as we've seen sort of here in the stories today.
Absolutely. Yeah, we talked about that a little bit when we did our initial studies, when we talked about Philemon, right? And then we went to Esther, and Esther, what did Mordecai say to her? Hey, God's going to deliver Israel,
right?
But
maybe he wants to use you, right?
Pretty sure he put you here for this reason. So
right.
Just be ready to answer the call. Is a good lesson. So, all right, that's it, everybody. God bless, and we'll see you next week.